There's a kind of person who walks into uncertainty and doesn't flinch, not because nothing affects them, but because somewhere early in life they learned that the world doesn't pause to let you catch your breath. So you learn to breathe while it's still moving. If you were raised in the 1960s, that person is very likely you. And here's what's worth understanding. You probably never called it resilience. You just called it getting on with things. But psychology has spent decades studying what happens to a child's developing mind when history doesn't wait outside the door, when it comes right into the living room. Picture it, early 1960s, you're sitting close to a television set, the screen small, the image gray, and the adults around you have gone quiet in a way that feels different from ordinary quiet. A president has just been shot in daylight, in front of cameras, in front of the country. No one explains what your face should do with that. And so you watch the adults, and the adults compose themselves. Dinner still gets made, homework still gets done, and somewhere in that moment, without anyone saying a word, you absorb a lesson that will stay with you for the rest of your life. The world can fracture, and you keep going. But here's where it gets interesting. That wasn't a single moment. It was a pattern. Kennedy, then King, then Bobby Kennedy. Vietnam casualty lists read aloud on the evening news while your family passed the bread. Cities burning in summers that were supposed to be warm and ordinary, and threaded through all of it. Adults who felt everything and expressed almost nothing. Psychologists call this emotional minimization, the unspoken agreement that feelings are acknowledged privately and function continues publicly. For a child watching that dynamic, the lesson isn't cruelty. It's architecture. You were learning, without knowing it, how to build a self that holds together under pressure. And something else was happening at the same time. The 1960s handed you a profound contradiction. The world was exploding with change, civil rights, protest, liberation, a man walking on the moon, and yet the adults in your life demanded composure. Sit still, be polite, don't make a fuss. So you learned to carry two things simultaneously, the enormity of what you were witnessing and the discipline of not letting it show. Developmental researchers studying generational emotional patterns have found that people who grew up navigating that kind of internal split, feeling one thing, presenting another, often develop what's called emotional complexity, not repression, something more sophisticated than that. The ability to hold contradictory truths without needing to resolve them immediately. That's why you can see multiple sides of an argument without losing your footing. That's why nuance doesn't frighten you the way it seems to frighten others. And then there's what the decade did to your relationship with hope. You were old enough to feel the electricity of possibility. A young president, a space program, a country that seemed to believe in its own future. And then you watched that possibility interrupted, repeatedly. But here's what that didn't do. It didn't make you cynical. It made you careful. You learned to hope with both eyes open, to want things genuinely while quietly preparing for the ways they might not arrive. Psychologists describe this as calibrated optimism, and it turns out to be one of the more durable psychological orientations a person can carry. Not naive enough to be shattered, not guarded enough to stop reaching. You got there the hard way, by watching hope survive damage over and over again across an entire decade of childhood. So when people look at you now and see someone unusually steady, someone who doesn't catastrophize, who doesn't need constant reassurance, who can sit with difficult news without falling apart, they're seeing the result of something that formed quietly a long time ago. You weren't shielded from the weight of the world. You were raised inside it. And without anyone designing it that way, that decade built in you something that's genuinely rare, a mind that knows how to stay whole when everything around it is breaking.